What is up, fam? It is Shar, and welcome to Living Color, where I provide quick tips and experiences on the law school experience and legal field as a person of color. August of this year will be the removal of logic games. Round of applause. Which is funny because that was actually my best section on the LSAT, from keeping it 100 transparent. But I think it's important to take it off for a multitude of reasons, which I will dive into in this video. But I wanted to talk about what removing the logic games will look like for people taking the LSAT in the future, my guesses and ideas of what the impact of it, and my experience with it, and my advice to those that are taking the LSAT before August, around August, and afterwards. So if you've been monitoring the discussions by LSAC regarding the logic games, this isn't much of a surprise to you that they actually move forward with removing the section. A lot of this is because of a 2019 settlement that occurred between LSAC and some blind applicants, test takers. And the claim by these test takers was that this section was inherently unfair because it required visuospatial capabilities that not everyone will have. And so there was a settlement, and since then LSAC was in talks of removing the section. So August of this year, there will now officially be 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comprehension section, and an experimental section. So first I want to say my experience with logic games. And so I took the LSAT during COVID, and I took it when it became digital. And preparing for logic games, honestly, from my experience, will be the long haul that LSAT studying is. I was a philosophy major in undergrad, so I wasn't privy to like logic games or anything in the same realm of logic games on my day-to-day. You know, reading comprehension and logical reasoning go hand in hand with philosophy, and logic games aren't really in the mix in that. So it took me a lot longer in my LSAT studying process just to master logic games. But what I will say is once I did master them, it was a lot more formulaic than mastering logical reasoning or reading comprehension. All of them have a formulaic way of teaching each section. Whereas, you know, in logical reasoning, you'll have question types similar, as well as reading comprehension, but also in reading comprehension, you'll have like which ones you should attack first, like logical reasoning. All of them require a strategy and some type of formula to master how to take the LSAT. So that's not just specific to logic games. But with logic games, I mean, for me in the least bit, once you mastered a certain game, you mastered that game. It wasn't like, you know, you kind of messed it up here and there. Like once you saw the type of game that was, you got it down easily without even having to double check it. So once I mastered logic games, and I feel like this with every section, once you mastered, it's not nearly as difficult, but the difficulty with the LSAT is diving down and mastering each section. I had my qualms with logic games initially, like everyone else. Once I mastered it, it was honestly my favorite section to do, my best section. I'm not saying favorite, like I enjoy taking the LSAT. So moving forward to the impact of this decision is that if you're someone like me and you are hearing this news and you've been studying for logic games this whole time, it might be disheartening, right? The discussion of whether logic games makes the exam harder or not, I think is purely subjective rather than actual, right? It's not reality. So when LSAC says it's done the data, it's done the research, removing the section will not decrease the difficulty of the LSAT, nor will it increase it, I think there's due reason to believe them on that front. They wouldn't do something that would be, quote unquote, too far off from what they typically do. And so if they figured that completely, there's a reason why they took as long as they did to come to the decision, because they were doing the research, because they were trying to find ways to remove it given the inequitable aspect of having logic games. So the impact of logic games. First off, I do think it makes the test more equitable, not even on the disability front, but also logic games is the reason why people take longer to study for the LSAT. it is an entire crutch of the test that requires really specialized mastery. A lot of time requires tutors and other resources. For me, I had a tutor for my logic games. I wasn't doing this raw dogging it. Check one of my last videos on how much money I spent on law LSAT resources to try to master the LSAT. Spent a lot of money, a lot of my own hard-earned money, and not everybody has those resources. So I will say that it makes it more equitable on that front for people that don't have those resources. They don't have to have or seek them out to do well on the LSAT. So I think that's a big thing. It helps kind of even the playing field. I have my thoughts on that, but evening the playing field, it kind of does that by removing the logic games section. Now there is back and forth on whether it will be more difficult in the sense of, is LSAT going to make logical reasoning and reading comprehension more difficult, and they're just going to make it 10 times harder now? LSAT itself said, we're not changing anything. Everything's going to be the same. It's still going to be a difficult test. I am of the view that LSAT was always a difficult test with or without logic games. It's going to be a difficult test. Whether we should believe LSAC on if they're going to keep it the way that it is, that's honestly up to you. We won't officially know until the first reviews of the test are given to us. So after the tests are taken and LSAC reviews them and publishes them, we won't necessarily know what they look like. But, like with anything else, it was a big thing from jumping from 5-section test to a 3-section test because of COVID to going back to a 4-section test with experimental. Like, there's a lot of jumping where people were constantly like, is it more difficult? Is it not more difficult? I don't think that should be the concern when you are confronted with taking this test. Prepare for it how you're supposed to prepare for it, and just take it the way that it is at the time. So you're not going to run away from the difficulty because you are thinking, well, maybe if I wait longer or if I do it now, or that it's going to be any less difficult. It is still going to be a very difficult test, regardless of what you choose. And I think the mindset should be, I'm going to prepare for it regardless of what happens, because I'm not going to lean on administrative changes to feed this idea that it'll be easier if I do. That's not my advice to you. My advice to you is, I'm going to prepare, and whatever happens, happens. I just think that as a result, it makes the test a little bit more equitable. And I'm always for that. When they made the exam completely online because of COVID, it makes the exam more equitable. People don't have to drive 2 to 3 hours. Before COVID happened, I was scheduled to take my exam 2.5 hours away from where I lived. Not everybody can afford to take an entire day to take an exam. Not everybody has the resources to do that. Not everybody has the resources to drive to practically a different state to take it. So making it online made things more equitable. Taking away a section that literally is unfair to those that are disabled or not able to capitalize on what the exam is asking of them, but also for people that don't have the resources for the training of the section, again, makes things a little bit more even. So I am not mad at any of these changes happening. It's making more people kind of want to consider going to law school. And for me, that's important for on every level, but especially as a person of color, that's very important, is to encourage people of color to enter the legal sphere, to create and provide more perspectives and differing perspectives. That's important. We should have things that encourage that. Lastly, my advice to you. Are you someone that is taking it before August? Are you someone taking it around August? Are you someone taking it after August? What should you do? How should you study? What should you decide? If you're taking it before August and you've studied to this point, continue to do what you're doing. You prepared for logic games, have faith in yourself, take the test as is. You've already signed up for it. I would not advocate for you to cancel and lose that money. Like, if you're confident what you have to do, take the exam. If you are someone that is around August and you don't know whether you should plan a date before August or after, is my advice to you. My advice is take a diagnostic test. I think deciding whether to focus on a section that you may or may not take is worth exploring. So take a diagnostic test, potentially simulating what the test would look like in August and what the test looks like now. And you can kind of make your determinations off that. Not necessarily saying that, oh, one is easier than the other, but based off of your study habits so far, it may be telling to where you might have focused on logical reasoning and reading comprehension this far and haven't really dived into logic games. And once you take that diagnostic, you can really see that and decide, you know what, I'm not going to take the one with logic games because I already haven't really done much studying for this bracket of the test anyways, and they're taking it off. So it seems like it's more of a waste of my time if I just crunch it in now and study for something that's no longer going to be on the test. But if you studied for logic games for like 3 or 4 months now and you take a diagnostic and you are well versed in logic games and you're considering taking it before August or after, you might want to take it before August. You have put all these resources into a section that you've studied well for and that you've started to master. Who's to say you can't completely master it in a few months' time? I guess my concern is how test prep organizations or test prep companies are dealing with this change. I'm pretty sure that they are going to adhere their model based off of this change. And the reason why I even have a concern about it is because, again, if you look at my past videos, I'm not a huge fan of Kaplan, mainly because their interface did not reflect what the exam currently was at the time, which at the time as I was taking it, it was completely digital. They still had a lot more to do with the shifting of their interface in that aspect. It was still very paper heavy, and that's why I also pushed 7 Sage, because they had transitioned that fairly quickly. And I'm pretty confident they're probably going to transition into this fairly quickly as well, because again, this isn't something that's a surprise to anyone by any means, especially if you're in the sphere of teaching people the test and tutoring people on the test. You are going to know this change was happening. So you've already kind of adjusted your practices and the ways that you tutor. In all, I don't think this is something that people should be concerned about. I don't think this is something that people should stress over. I think people should just make adjustments like they have before. As time has progressed, LSAT has progressed as well. We've seen a lot of changes in the past probably 5 to 8 years with it, more significantly than ever before. But a lot of that is because of technological advancement and just in general, people needing a more equal playing field. And like I said, I'm always game for that. Peace, guys.